I was at a conference, and we were speaking with a bunch of folks from the US who were specializing in the geospatial mapping of the US. Now, this meant, of course, that they had high resolution data of the entire country. They had heavy digitization, and very offhandedly, the gentleman says, "Oh, of course, you guys have different problems." Right, like, which basically, like, translated into saying that, of course, India, like, because right now we were at this point arguing that we are doing the Swamitva Yojana, X million villages would be there as part of the drone mapping. Now, the reason, of course, it becomes crucial is because you needed that data to be there, and we didn't have that kind of heavy satellite data to be able to actually procure that data or information in another way. And I think it's interesting because now we are entering an era where we have the resources, the technology, the ability and the imagination, and also to a large degree the gumption and just the ambition to be able to chase these things. And I think that is what has changed in the last 10-15 years, where we are essentially in a position where not only do we know how to make it, where we have the ability to make it and take a chance also. So I'll give you an example of like where what we are doing right now, for example, right? Like, we have been working on highways and infrastructure for almost 3 years now. Independently or individually, we were looking at highways for 6 years now. Now, one highway at a time, a lot of people were willing to take a bet on. And of course, like, this was standard procedure in construction mapping across the world. So across the world, a lot of project managers would use drones to be able to track their infra. They would take decisions like for their own infra within that space, like, very routinely. Except from the theory to practice at scale in India was not happening. And when we were going one at a time, so this was kind of like we were addressing one wound at a time rather than taking a very holistic approach. And in the last 3 years, what has happened is, and quite serendipitously, I don't think I can take the credit for this. This has more to do with the credit of an entire organization and an entire system for being able to be willing to take this technology, or any technology for that matter, at this scale, because it's unprecedented, like, even worldwide, to have this kind of 10,000, 20,000 kilometer mapping happening on a monthly basis. It's never heard of, like, to use drones at this scale. And it came out of necessity. It's very similar to how our, like, 3G, 4G, or like mobile networks or telecom, like, networks have been. We've basically jumped eras. And that's why I said it would be interesting to see how we go from this point onward. So yes, we are developing, and I do not entirely mind that as a fact. Also, it's a sign of growth. But also, I do think that some ambition, a little bit of courage is a necessity in this entire, like, scheme of things.
Well, one thing I can tell you as a matter of fact, and that goes for whether it is us or somebody else doing it. Like, we just have that faith in the evolution of technology. You're going to see a massive number of interconnected objects, specifically robots, drones, and all of these technologies being proliferated, being common. आप सड़क पे चलेंगे, you'll be walking out on the street, you'll be driving on the highway, and you'll have a drone passing over your head. Probably there'll be different kinds of drones. Probably they'll be smaller, nano, large, different kinds of things. But the technology and the world undoubtedly and unreservedly is moving towards a larger proliferation of technology. AI is just coming around the corner in this particular decade of 20s to 30s. By the time we go into the second half of the 21st century, after 2050, I believe, well, one, we will be old enough, and two, we as the world will be better off. We as a country will be better off. Individual humans will be better off. We are absolutely sure of that.
This is interesting. I think the world is changing. And to be really honest, like, I'm big on like the whole AI advent layer myself, because it's just like cuts down my work and makes it easier. So I would consider myself a quasi member of their community.
That's how she's trying to pass off as younger than she is. So yeah, we believe in Gen Z.
Millennials are a lot about the hustle. We want to do this, we want to do that. But I think, like, Gen Zs do have, like, they've seen our hustle. They've seen, like, the boomers trying to set up and create, like, a survival mode family. So and now they're just like, yeah, none of this matters. But at the end of the day, I think they did get like some things right, and it's kind of cool the interfaces of thought that we are looking at now, like the sudden nostalgia that is coming in from a design standpoint, or like the sudden or reality of sci-fi, as we had spoken about earlier as well, like the reality of suddenly, like, all of these technologies becoming a very core part of your life. Like, I mean, I spend like half my time talking to ChatGPT, and I think that's true for a lot of us. So it's interesting, like, where Gen Z is going, and like where are and how their thought process would be shaped by this easy access to not just information but insight, and the ability to communicate, which were all things that were limited to humans till this point. So the ability to create and bring something into, like, product startups, like what we used to spend months doing something and creating a product, now an entire feature or a plugin can be rolled out in like less than a week or a few hours. And that is radically different from what it used to be. And of course, that means that the ability to think, and it's basically let there be light, right? Like, it's basically like what you can think and what you can execute. It's no longer limited by ability and training. It's limited by your imagination, and that's a very interesting place to be from the perspective of where the future is going to be.
Well, I guess the first thing I will say is please be very ready for disagreements. Having disagreements is the way that you learn. Having disagreements should be given with the context. The reason people fear disagreements and bad decisions is because they are not sure that their co-founders or their team members are going to last through those disagreements and those decisions. If somebody makes you comfortable that, okay, come here, kid, you can make a mistake, but decide something. You can go left or right, you might take the wrong route, but take a bet and take a risk and make a decision. And over time, you start inculcating that ability and that capacity that you may be wrong. You may be wrong not just a few times, but a lot of the times, but that you have the audacity to be able to, the courage to be able to make those decisions and have those every day. They're certainly not going to be right decisions at all times, but I don't believe that decision making necessarily is a one point thing, that like that you're just deciding something once and then it sticks. That's not how decision making works. Like you very correctly asked the question and framed the question, you're making hundreds of decisions on a daily basis. So the moment you feel that something is not going as it should, you need to instill in yourself a very good habit of course correction, because you have to first of all accept the fact that you will not always be right about everything in the predictive scenario, in having the foresight, and therefore being able to course correct things is extremely important. Being able to feel safe that your team members, your co-founders, your directors, people that you stand on the shoulders of, that they are not going to run away because of X and Y decision. You have to allow people, including leaders, the ability to make mistakes, the safety to make mistakes, with the assurity that you can do a course correction when required, and that you're not so strong-headed, that you're not open-minded enough to be able to make course corrections as you go along. I think that's the more crucial part.
The thing is that you correct in identifying that in terms of where you do see a lot of drop-offs and somewhere around mid-management and like in the middle stages of the career. And it's easy to argue that a lot of women have come in decision-making positions in the last like couple of years or maybe decades. Actually in the last decade or so, and of course like a fair bit of, or at least visibly some women founders do exist in India. Having said that, like I think it's not enough. B, decision making is something that you do need to still have a lot of control on. See, when you are like, maybe if I was 25-year-old and you are trying to make a career, not just in tech, like, I mean, you could be in biopharma, you could be in pretty much anything. You need allies. And what that means is, like, when I was early in my career, I was looking at a lot of these women who were older than me, who had, like, let's say, become CEOs of large organizations, like leading FMCG industries. And I realized that there were not many people whose career I would base my entire career or personality on. Like, it's something that everybody in college tells you. Like, you look at LinkedIn, you analyze all of these people, you analyze their careers, and then you break it down and you do what you think worked for them. Except, like, I didn't see anybody like whose exact path or blueprint would lead me to where I wanted to be. And that had more to do with the fact that there aren't enough sample, like within the sample space, there are not enough people to be able to serve you as those kind of role models for you to actually create that combination of things. Which means that I think the only way you can potentially work around this is by creating a network of allies who are working with you during this journey, giving you, and you need the mentors, and it doesn't have to be female mentors alone. A lot of my mentors are people who have daughters, who do believe that, like, now is a generation that can take decisions, and they would like the same thing for me that they want for their own daughters. So it's like, wherever you find these allies, wherever you find these believers, you need to hold on to it. You need to hold on to the information, knowledge that is coming from these people. And additionally, like within your own friend circle as well, I do believe that you have to make those friends. Lastly, I would tell you just one very practical advice. You need to have a very good handle on who the legal teams are and who the accountancy is being done by. Like, these are two things, like, because I've seen like a lot of women essentially handing over this portion of their lives to other people, and that has been consistent across the years, and I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. So at least that a portion of your life you need to have an understanding on and a grip on, and the ability to, like, they should be your best friends. Like, that would be my one piece of advice.
That's true, and I'll kind of add on there with an example. So Leonardo da Vinci, right? We all enjoy his paintings. We all enjoy the Mona Lisa. Two things that are thought-provoking to think about is: do you think Da Vinci knew when he was making the Mona Lisa that he's going to make the Mona Lisa, as famous as it is today? Probably not. And second, any inventor, any creator, we might enjoy Picasso's paintings, we might enjoy Da Vinci's works. Their life themselves was full of struggle. They did not create those paintings because it seemed glamorous and they wanted it to be valued at $500 million, 100 years later. They made those paintings because that's the only way they could, and this might be a twisted way of putting it, but that's the only way they could get their demon out. जो उनके अंदर वो जो दिमाग में itch है, they are trying to get that out. They're trying to get that creativity out. They're trying to get that need to be able to create and live life as per their terms. And very often, more often than not, it is not glamorous. It is not as it seems on the outside. It is in fact not even normal. I mean, typically you would imagine that, okay, maybe the life is not as glamorous, but it would at least be at par, or it would at least be normal. And very often that is the misconception of it. Being a founder means that you probably have the most amount of load and liability in being able to figure out things at odd hours, at times when nobody else is trying to do that and nobody else is responsible enough for it.
It's founders just to make money, and that's okay too. I think that
I would imagine making that. No, that's a brilliant example, because some people become founders to make money. That is coming from a massive need to be able to generate that amount of capital.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody else, or most of us would probably be happy in a job just living paycheck to paycheck, but that one person would probably have the need so gnawing at his brain that leaving everything else in his life and sitting down day and night, all he's concerned about is making that wealth and making that money creation machine. And that's what I'm trying to get at. When Da Vinci and when Picasso were trying to make those paintings, it was not for the pleasure of getting them valued at $100 million 100 years later. It was because they had an itch in their mind, and they were the ones responsible enough and the only ones capable enough to do that in their vicinity. And therefore, it was a burden to them to be able to do that, live out that life in that struggle. Now, today, we revere them and we admire them. But for the creator, for the founder, it was probably a very, very hard journey.
For me, it's a lot simpler. Like, for me, let's say if you were working at any of these four technologies, I think it's about first principles. You do it right, and like then you might as well be very good at it. Like because that would be crucial for not just like survival from a company standpoint, but again like going back to the fact that all of these technologies have far-reaching consequences. Not just you, but the collective. So if that is the case, then there is a responsibility that comes with it. If I was doing it again now, after all these years and a little bit of more experience under my belt, I would probably like. It's funny, but I would probably like would be less, more experimental, but would work with slightly larger organizations and would have gone with slightly more patient capital. Like that is something that I would suggest, like any company that is starting now as well, that you would need patient capital on this journey. You would need the ability to experiment. You would need, because like for us, we have bootstrapped this company for a very long time, and that has given us the ability to make these choices. But like if you were doing it on your own, and like if you were doing it now, in all of these scenarios, you need to be A, very good at the tech, B, like the financial pressure shouldn't exceed your ability to do something or your willingness to do something. So that moral compass should never be superseded by any of these things, which basically means that there has to be control at what you do and how you do it, and you need to be able to experiment early with these things.